Last week, in the wake of the new Harry Potter TV show cast announcement, I started the pretty ambitious project of mapping out every single episode of every single season of the new show. It's a pretty massive project, but today I'm excited to bring episode 2 to life. This episode is going to cover the rest of chapter 4 that we started in the previous episode, and move on to chapters 5 and 6. Now, there are some pretty memorable and important moments in these chapters, but as we're going to be spending the majority of our time in one location, I've decided to name the episode, like chapter 5 of the book, Diagon Alley. Like most big budget TV shows, this episode is going to start with a quick recap of what happened in episode 1. Obviously, we ended with that iconic cliffhanger, Harry, you're a wizard. Probably one of the most iconic cliffhangers that we're ever going to get in this entire series. It left the audience hanging as Harry learned about his new identity, and we will jump straight into Harry's reaction, including Hagrid's explanation of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, Harry's brief backstory, and everything else that's magical. Of course, we'll have the Dursleys' reaction and their outrage to everything that Hagrid is telling him, and we will have the moment of Hagrid giving Dudley his pigtail. We would then jump to Harry waking up at the hut on the rock, still not really daring to believe what happened. In the book it says that he keeps his eyes closed and hears a tapping, and it must be Aunt Petunia knocking on his cupboard door. But then when he opens his eyes, his coat falls off him, and he notices Hagrid sleeping by the fire, and the tapping is actually coming from an owl at the window. Then he opens the window, the owl flies in and starts attacking Hagrid's coat. Hagrid then tells Harry to pay the owl, so Harry starts rummaging through all of Hagrid's pockets, finding humbugs and slug pellets, and finally finding the money. It's a small moment, but as we have time, it is something that I would like to include because, again, it just builds that whimsical flavour even more than in the movie, and it just gives that gradual introduction for Harry of anything out of the ordinary. Then we move on to the boat ride with Hagrid and Harry leaving the hut on the rock. Hagrid then enchants the boat to go faster, and yet again it's just another small introduction for Harry to the wizarding world, seeing magic used properly for the first time. The leaky cauldron scene will be very similar to the movie. I think they did a good job there, but I really want to emphasise the magical and mystical atmosphere within the pub even more so. I enjoy reading Harry's description of characters that he sees in the pub, like old ladies bickering in the corner and mysterious hooded figures. So if we could get a little more screen time of characters like that in the pub, again, I just think it helps build that atmosphere. And then when Harry meets Quirrell, I want to ensure that he is wearing plain robes with no turban just yet. And then when we see him later on in the Great Hall wearing his purple turban, we get that visual cue that something's off. It's something that Harry notices is odd in the book, but obviously in the movie he's just wearing the turban from the moment we meet him. The ending of sequence 1 of episode 2 will be the reveal of Diagon Alley. Hagrid and Harry will go to the back of the leaky cauldron, they'll tap the brick in the wall will open up, and we will get that grand wide view of Diagon Alley and Harry's look of shock and awe before we are hit with our first advert break. Again, it's just one of those mini cliffhangers that will stick with you as you are sitting through the advert break, making you desperate for the adverts to end so you can see what's going to happen next. So sequence 2 will start with Harry and Hagrid walking down Diagon Alley, similar to the movie, with Hagrid pointing out different shops and where Harry needs to go to pick up some of his school supplies. And I want to flesh this out a little bit more than the movie does. In the movie we saw brief flashes of different shops, but I would like to see even more shops included in much more detail. I'd like to see the magical menagerie, the apothecary, and of course, Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlour. We then get the Gringotts scene and the introduction to goblins. I think this is really important to emphasise goblins and their place in society, as again it will become very important for later seasons. We then get the Gringotts cart ride down to the vaults, which will provide a really nice fast-paced moment, as again the best TV shows need their ups and downs for every single episode. We didn't get that scene in the Philosopher's Stone movie, although we did see it in Deathly Hallows Part 2. I did enjoy that scene in Deathly Hallows Part 2, but I have a slightly different vision to how it could be in this show. Whenever I've read this scene, I've always envisioned something slightly different, something a little bit more claustrophobic and tight in some areas, with wider areas in other parts, kind of flashing through different caves that Harry gets glimpses in. Of course, he sees fire emitting from one and wonders if that could be a dragon. This is obviously a little bit different from the Deathly Hallows Part 2 interpretation, where they're flying through giant caverns with waterfalls while the cart spins around and around. Again, I did like this, but it's these little moments where you can tweak something, add a little bit more style that can make it really feel very different from the movies. And then when they get to the vaults, the rest of the Gringotts scene will play out pretty much exactly like the Philosopher's Stone film. After Gringotts, Hagrid will head to the Leaky Cauldron for a pick-me-up as the cart ride didn't agree with him, and then we will get a scene that was completely left out of the movie, but something that I think is crucial to include here. This is of course Harry heading to Madame Malkin's to get his robes, and our first introduction to Draco Malfoy, although we don't meet him by name yet. Even though Harry doesn't learn his name yet, his discomfort for Malfoy's arrogance and dismissiveness is crucial for setting up their rivalry early. Again, it's just one of those small scenes that I will absolutely love to see brought to life. Next, we have the Ollivander scene, and I mean, let's just be honest. You don't really need to change anything here. John Hurt's performance as Ollivander is absolutely iconic, the whole scene is phenomenal, and yeah, I think you just basically keep it exactly the same, with Ollivander's mysterious aura carrying the scene and the magical moment where Harry's wand chooses him. Then Hagrid gives Harry Hedwig, and they head to Florian Fortescue's for ice cream. Any excuse to go back to Florian Fortescue's, honestly, one of my favourite characters, even though we only briefly meet him in the books, but it's somewhere where I would absolutely love to spend all of my time if I was in the Wizarding World. And whilst they eat their ice creams, Harry will explain his confusion and concern for everything he doesn't know, and Hagrid will give Harry that brief explanation of why he's famous. Finally, sequence 2 of this episode will end with Hagrid taking Harry onto the train to go back to the Dursleys for one more month. In the movies, they go straight to King's Cross Station, but again, I want to keep this as similar to the books as possible, so we'll have an emotional moment with Harry waving goodbye to Hagrid as he heads off back to Privet Drive for his final month. This will mark the end of sequence 2 and our next advert break. And now we reach episode 2, third and final sequence, which will cover chapter 6, The Journey from Platform 9 3/4. We get a quick montage of Harry's final month at Privet Drive, with the Dursleys being terrified of him, Dudley refusing to stay in the same room with him, etc, etc, before we get Harry asking Uncle Vernon to take him to King's Cross Station the next day. Uncle Vernon agrees, and the next scene will be them dropping him off at King's Cross Station, laughing at him when he realises he doesn't know where Platform 9 3/4 is. We then follow the story very closely to the movie for a while, with Harry meeting the Weasleys for the first time, getting onto Platform 9 3/4, and finally getting on the train. Just like in the movie, Ron will join Harry in his compartment and they'll proceed to buy all of their snacks, whilst Ron informs Harry much more about things in the Wizarding World. We definitely need to include Harry properly reading Dumbledore's Chocolate Frog card, of course. I want the audience as well to get that first mention of Nicholas Flamel, so we have that clue going forward, as again it will become very important in a later episode of this season. Now at this point we probably will be running out of time. I'd imagine there's only 10 minutes or so until the end of the episode, so I don't think we can include absolutely everybody coming in and out of Harry and Ron's cabin. In the book we get Neville, then Hermione, then Draco, Crabbe and Goyle, and then Hermione again. However, I do love the scene where Scabbers bites Goyle's finger when he tries to take their snacks, so we have to try and cram that in somehow, especially as it will give another small action moment, which again adds to that ups and downs that we need in every episode. Once Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle leave, we will then get our first introduction to Hermione and pretty much follow exactly what the movie did. I think that was great. And now we finally reach our climax of episode 2, with the iconic entrance to Hogwarts. The students arrive at the station, they meet Hagrid, they go down to the boats, and take that boat journey across the lake, and we get the iconic view of Hogwarts Castle. And quickly, while we're on the castle, I do want to change some things, obviously, about the atmosphere and appearance of certain locations, such as the Gringotts cart ride. However, that Hogwarts skyline is so iconic that, personally, I would try and just keep it very, very, very similar to the movies, if not just exactly the same. I just think it's too iconic to introduce us to anything else, to be honest with you. The students and Hagrid will then enter the castle, and the episode will end in the same way as the chapter, with Hagrid arriving at the big doors and knocking 3 times before we cut to black and the credits hit. And that's my plan for episode 2. Quite a bit of moving around, from the entrance to Diagon Alley, the claustrophobic cart ride, the journey from Platform 9 3/4, and the iconic entrance and view of Hogwarts Castle. I think all of these locations are absolutely key, especially to try and get into one episode, because it really captures Harry's first steps into the wizarding world in such a perfect way. So, let me know in the comments if there's anything else you would like to change or add to make this episode even better. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any further updates for this upcoming project. I'll see you next time, where I'm going to be planning Harry Potter Season 1, Episode 3.